Morning, everybody. How are you today? Today's June 20th. Oh boy, my head is really, really big, isn't it? Maybe I should do something about that. Deflate my ego a little here, shall we? Click on that thing, click on that thing, click on that thing right there. There we go. A little small now. Facial features aren't directly in front of you like that. All right, so how's everybody doing today? Thank you for joining me on today's broadcast. This is June 20th, 2019. That would be a Thursday for those of you trying to keep track. Yes, indeed, it is Thursday. So thank you, everybody, for joining me. That was Pretzel.rocks. For those of you who are looking for some decent royalty-free music, they're pretty cool. Today, I thought I'd talk about a pretty substantial problem, I think, in the industry. And what industry are you speaking of, Steve? That would be the software development or technology field related around data sciences too, sometimes cybersecurity, software development, software engineering, that sort of thing. And that has to do with the technical interview. And I think it is broken. And I found a pretty good article kind of going through some of those things. So let's take a look at that today. All right. I've got a screaming, meowing cat outside my door who would love to come in here and say hi to everybody. I'm sure you guys would love to say hi to her too, but trust me, she's a little camera shy. She would probably be very upset with me if I tried to pick her up right now. Anyway, so today's topic is about the technical interview. And the article today is actually from medium.com, and I have my failings with Medium. I think there's certain things I kind of not too particularly happy about them with, but that's okay. Sometimes they do have some decent articles, and this is a good one. And I got my highlighting stuff all over it, so I like to do this highlighting to kind of keep me on track of the main bullet points of things, so that you guys don't have to read. I'm not going to read the whole entire article, just the pieces that I think are relevant. And they came up with hiring is broken. What do developers say about technical interviews? So what they did was they took Hacker News. They took the comments of Hacker News, and they summarized the comments all together when dealing with technology interviews. So they start off with, consider the following code question from LeetCode. So this is LeetCode is, if nobody's ever looked at them, they're basically a place where you can go kind of like upsize your skills. Like if you're already in the industry and you want to learn a few additional things, you can come here. There's lots of sites like this. There's lots of places you can go to kind of upskill. In fact, at WazU, we also do some upskilling too. To just try to, give you a few more items that you can learn. But one of the things that they do here is they give you like this question, and you have to solve it, right? So let's see I don't know if this is one here, but you can go here. I'll just go back to the article. So one of them is maximum subarray. Given an integer array nums, find the contiguous subarray containing at least one number, which has the largest sum, and return its sum. Now, you could do this through a series of if statements and, holding on to values in variables. You could possibly even do some tail calls. There's lots of different ways to solve a problem like that. The solution is called Kadane's algorithm. Now, I'm not going to go into the solution because I honestly don't even know. I don't know this Kadane's algorithm. I've never had to learn it. Never once have I ever needed Kadane's algorithm to solve a problem on the job site. And that is the heart of the problem. Various solutions to this question with cubic, quadratic, and linear time complexities. The problem is really a toy. It was never incorporated into a system. That's right. How often are you going to run into this? in your job as a software developer, how many times are you going to have to find the contiguous subarray within an array with its where the largest sum and return that sum? And it honestly, like, there's a lot of extensions and stuff that you can find that solve this problem already. Like, if there's an algorithm to do something, chances are somebody's already come up with it. Somebody's already built the application or built the function that does that kind of problem solving. Why the heck do I need to do it? Developers within the Elite Code community report that within the past 6 months, this coding question has been used in technical interviews as well as at well-known software companies such as Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and Uber. So all these big-name companies are using these things in order to try to determine the viability of a candidate. Anybody else seeing the problem with this? I mean, how many times are you going to run into that, right? It begins with so they start talking about the different stages that you go through typically for an interview process and getting a job and getting hired. It begins with an initial screening of the candidate, usually conducted over the phone or through an online coding site, which is, that's what my experience has been. The candidate may be invited for an on-site visit. This on-site visit consists of a series of one-on-one interviews, each 45 minutes to an hour over a period of half a day to several days with engineers and sometimes managers. Yeah, I had, for one job, it took me 4 interviews. 4. I had to interview 4 times for the job. Like, they wanted to be really, really, really sure. Candidate, let's see. So the interview primarily focuses on technical coding or algorithms with whiteboarding or using a text editor. And basically they're just trying to test the problem solving or analytical ability, right? That's what they're trying to do in these technical interviews is we're trying to judge what do you know and are you able to solve difficult problems? Are you able to solve these kind of complex issues? For hiring managers, technical interviews can have considerable appeal. That's right. I mean, if you kind of standardize the testing, it makes it kind of this blanket filter, right? You can ask questions from the company's question bank instead of having to design your own interview questions. So there's a little bit of laziness there, right? Especially if people don't even understand what they're even asking. Sometimes they're just looking for the answer. If you can get somebody potentially somebody with a little bit of some acumen, maybe not a total understanding, and just kind of say, ask them this question and look for this answer. That's really not the best way to go about it, because if that's what you're doing, you're not really putting somebody with a proper amount of analysis of the job on the task of finding someone that's going to be a colleague. And that's kind of a problem there. Okay, instead of having to design their own interview questions, reduce variation between interviewers, and candidates can be evaluated through objective scoring criteria. New interviewers are straightforward to train. Interviewers can interchangeably ask coding questions to any software engineering candidate, and the result is more or less a standardization or a meritocracy, okay? Technical interview pipeline. Meritocratic. There we go. Meritocratic. Sometimes big words, Steve, no find. Okay, experiences of interview candidates tell a very different story. That's right. So from the other side of things. So yes, making this standardization of questions, having this technological, like these pretty complex questions to try to gauge the intelligence or the understanding or the problem-solving ability of the person being asked, that's what their aim is, and I understand what the advantage is from the business perspective is. However, as this article rightly points out, the experiences of the interview candidates, of the interviews, right, the interviewees, tells a very different story. Technical interviews are broken. They're antagonistic. They're a form of high-pressure whiteboard algorithm hazing. Nothing to do with real day-to-day developer work, and they're humiliating professionally. The algorithm question is really a lottery of luck and chance and requires substantial upfront investment from the candidate to learn. That's right. Like, basically, you're going to ask there's like, how many of these algorithmic questions can you possibly ask? There's hundreds of thousands of them. You can ask all sorts of different ones. And it just so happens, if you happen to have learned that particular algorithm and you learned it really, really, really well, then you might remember when it comes time to actually answer it under pressure. So what are the chances of that? Like, what are the chances that you're going to know the algorithm that this interviewer is looking for you to know how to solve when there's so many different algorithms out there? Okay? I mean, it's hard enough for us to learn the programming language itself, or the framework that we're working with, or the extensions, right? The different functions, the plugins, the tooling that is used. Visual Studio Code, Eclipse, Atom, whatever your IDE is of choice, with all the different plugins. Like, you have to learn all of that. You have to learn the programming language. You have to learn. There's just a ton of stuff you got to learn. For me, it's like patterns and practices. Those are the things that I want to know you know how to do, okay? That, to me, is the next step in a person's evolution from beginner or junior developer to, say, mid-level developers. Can you tell me about the strategy pattern, okay? Can you tell me about the decorator pattern? Those are the kinds of things that are actually used on a fairly regular basis. Not all the time, obviously. You don't always use those things, but they can be very helpful to make some better code. Those are the kinds of things I like to ask. Do you know the solid principles? Tell me about agile. What does agile mean to you? Because those are the actual things that, when it comes down to it, those are the things that you actually have to do. Those are the skills that you have to utilize and know how to work with other people and work with other code and make code better and make good code, right? Clean code, right? Those are the kinds of things that you need to know in order to work well with the rest of the group. Knowing an algorithm that's never going to be used, and chances are you've never even seen it before, like, that's not really a good measure, in my opinion. And it's really, like they said, a lottery of luck and chance. That's a great way of putting it. And there is a ton of upfront investment. You have to learn all these algorithms. To learn all these algorithms. Do all these algorithms make you a better programmer? Are you a better programmer for knowing 100 different algorithms? And one of them might be the one that you get asked in the interview. Does that make you a better developer? In my opinion, no. It just means that you've retained some sort of knowledge that's already got some sort of helper function to do it for you. All right, so they do kind of break down. Again, this article is based upon the comments from the Hacker News. Okay, so this is just kind of like they aggregate across all the comments from Hacker News, which is a sister site, I believe, of Medium. I'm pretty sure. And they just kind of aggregate across this, and then they just come up with. They have this nice little extreme sentiments by title. Programmers are confessing their sins to protest a broken job interview process. That's the highest number of, it's 303 points with 226 comments. And I guess they have this polarity rating, which I think is how negative the people found this particular topic. Uber ATC is disguising research as fake job interviews. So they're just basically disguising. They do a little bit of research, and then they like, okay, that's a really good question. Let's ask that in an interview. Ask Hacker News, failed interview, feeling unemployable and depressed. What do I do? Right. That's the title of someone posting in Hacker News. Somebody posted that question. That's a good one. Right? Like that probably is the way a lot of people feel right after they get rejected because they didn't know an algorithm. My day interviewing for the service economy startup from hell. Okay. The programming interview from hell. Yeah. The most positive titles. Best interview questions to spot ideal employees. Thanks, Hacker News. Developers and YC companies video speed interview for free. Ask Hacker News, what should an ideal developer interview process look like? Ask Hacker News, what are good tech jobs that don't require being good at interviewing? Good luck with that. Video games beat interviews to recruit the very best. Yeah, actually, I kind of like that. Video games beat interviews to recruit the very best because they have to be a little bit more, I guess, artistic. They have to be a little bit more. It's not so standardized and strict. It's a little bit about personality, right, and how you're going to work together. Survivalizer says, "What's the best way to crash course on design patterns for an interview?" Yeah, so I'd say read the book, the Gang of Four book. I can't remember the title off the top of my. It's always called the Gang of Four. Wait. Oh, come on. Why'd you have to do this to me, keyboard? Good thing I got a mechanical keyboard here, just waiting for me to plug in. I think my Bluetooth goes out once in a while, and All right. Now that I have a keyboard, let me try this again. So it's called the Gang of Four. I should know the name of this, but patterns. This is really kind of like the standard. What do they call it? Authors Gamma, Helm, Ralph Johnson, and those cities are often referred to as Gang of Four. Where is it? Historically design patterns. Come on. Elements of reusable object-oriented software. So, yeah, design patterns. Elements of reusable object-oriented software. That's what it's called. It's often just referred to as the Gang of Four book. That would be a start if you're into the reading side of things. If not, then I would say like Pluralsight actually has a really good. They have a really good like patterns library. So if you have a Pluralsight subscription, that's a place to go. At Wazoo, we teach a lot of. We don't teach all of them. There's like 24 different design patterns that I think they do in there. It's 22 or 24. First two chapters, one give pitfalls or object the remaining, describing 23 class. Yeah, 24. So they got 24, or no, 25. No, 23. Okay, 23. I can never remember exactly these numbers. See, I'm terrible. My memory is not good about these things. I have to research so many things. I swear, I Google. I still agree with the axiom. Never memorize something you can look up. Okay? That's the Albert Einstein quote, right? Albert Einstein said, never memorize something you can look up. So to me, why would I need to memorize algorithms? Why would I need to memorize how many design patterns does the Gang of Four book have? These are the types of things that it's like, you know, I don't need to know those things off the top of my head. I can do a quick little, that's what the internet is for. It's for me to be able to go look up little interesting facts like that. I forgot what a decorator is, but a factory is similar to me. Yeah, factory pattern. Thanks. Interesting. My old professor said, RTFM, read the effing manual. That's right. Yeah, RTFM. Sometimes I read the manual on things in order to do it, but yeah, I do like just going to YouTube and like Gang of Four patterns. You can find all sorts of different people doing it, and you can find for whatever language that you're writing in. I know, for example, you, Jake, you're more of a C# developer, so you could probably just go to YouTube and do like here. Let's do that, shall we? Wait, hold on. Let me do it over here. So I'll just type in Gang of Four design patterns C#. Oh, that's the first one. And what do we get? There we go. Design patterns. Learn C# design patterns step by step in 8 hours. So yeah, there's like a bunch of design patterns. So there's the adapter pattern, Momenta design pattern, all sorts of stuff. So you can even look it up in your specific programming language. So if you want C# or Java, I mean, that's really what I would do, is just look up the Gang of Four stuff. That's going to get you really, really started off well. Okay, let's go back to, let's close that down. All right. So our analysis of Hacker News identifies several concerns. Candidates perceive these practices as subjective, arbitrary, unnecessary, stressful, non-inclusive, and at times demeaning to their sense of self-worth and self-efficacy. We propose guidelines to make hiring more inclusive and equitable without sacrificing interviewing effectiveness. For example, providing candidates with explicit evaluation criteria in advance. So letting me know what you're going to interview me on so I can kind of prepare. That way it's not completely randomized in the luck of the lottery. So there's this one set of comments they seem to follow. Well, I guess there's a few different ones. Yeah, so they're going by HN189444999. So they're using like not their actual handles, but rather just their IDs, I guess, on Hacker News. Building a great and useful app rarely requires Herculean feats of logic and puzzle solving. The number of times I've seen things like dynamic programming come up in a real-world application are vanishingly small. That's right. Again, in my opinion, like, if there is a problem like that needs to be solved, chances are there's some sort of function that already does it for us, right? You just got to give it the input, or you just got to call that extension. So, yeah. I'm a data scientist, and Google asked me to sum all values of nodes at each height of a tree. I had to implement the tree, BFS, and the algo, which was easy once you had the BFS, in 25 minutes, minus any talkie time. BFS is not something I thought about much in the last 5 years, and quite frankly, could care less about. I got stuck when I knew I needed something to finish implementing BFS but couldn't remember, and the Google interviewer offered no help. That's right, they just sit there and just quietly judge. Oh, you don't know the answer. You silly, silly person, you thought you could get hired at Google and you don't even know. Right? That's the kind of feeling that we have when we're being interviewed like this. This then becomes representative of your experience, in spite of the fact that you are never likely to be confronted with that kind of problem with that kind of time frame. Whatever it is on your CV and whatever you can say about what you've learned over the years becomes totally irrelevant in the face of that. Yeah, it's like I've learned all of these things. I know how to do this, but I've got 20 minutes to solve this really complex problem, and I don't know the algorithm exactly that you're looking for. If you're a programmer, you like to solve puzzles. That's what it really should be about, right? How can you solve this puzzle? In a lot of these questions, they're asking you to solve things from complete scratch. I don't know about you, but I'm not using Notepad to write much of my code. That's not really where I go to. That's not my go-to IDE, is Notepad. I use Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio or Eclipse, right? I've got some IntelliSense. I've got ways of pulling in the things that I need and finding the extensions that I'm looking for and the namespaces I'm looking for. I don't have all of these things memorized. No one's going to have it memorized. Oh my God, you'd have to be a complete robot to remember all these things. There are career stages. For candidates just out of school or with little experience, asking algorithmic questions totally makes sense. I kind of disagree with that. For more senior candidates who actually progressed to the next stage, not just spent a lot of years, the questions become more real life, more open-ended, and with more than one, and sometimes none, correct answer. I disagree with the first part of that statement, honestly. For candidates just out of school or with little experience, asking algorithmic questions totally makes sense. I disagree. What is I would be asking more like, what What's the difference between a regular, well, if you're doing JavaScript, for example, what's the difference between a function expression and a named function? Okay, that's kind of a in the weeds. You really got to know what you're talking about, but it's more about the language and what you're working with and understanding the consequences. What are the differences between the two? They do have, there's not much of a difference, but there is a difference. And sometimes that can be, those little differences can be impactful in the way that you write your code. What is a helper function? What's the difference between a function and a helper function? Okay, it's like a little tiny, if you know this, that's good. Do you need to know it? Maybe not, but it helps me kind of judge what your level of knowledge is and whether or not you're going to be able to help with the code. Again, I go back to the solid principles. Like that's a big one. I ask solid principles of everybody I ever interviewed. What are the solid principles? Can you tell me what they are? Now, I get that that's kind of more of that high education learning. It's maybe more specific to me. You may not have even been taught the solid principles in school. That may not have had it. As a matter of fact, I don't think that in our education we do solid principles. But what it does tell me is whether or not you have actually gone on to try to be a better developer. Are you trying to do something more than just the basics? That's why I look for design patterns and solid principles. Okay. Those are the big things for me because they help write better code, right? They help you solve problems. If you know those patterns, if you know about the solid principles, then you write better code. You write code very quickly because you know how to solve these problems. You can pull from those type of memory banks. How many times are you going to run into an algorithm where you need an algorithm? How many times are you going to run into those kind of questions versus how many times are you going to need to implement a design pattern, right? Strategy pattern, I love the strategy. It's always my favorite. This is my classic one, is a strategy pattern. I think it's my favorite pattern of all of them because if I told you that I can eliminate the need for a switch statement or a select case, depending upon the language you're dealing with, I can get rid of a switch or select case. I can get rid of it. You don't need it. You never need to use one because you use the design pattern, which is much more dynamic, allows you to have, much more stuff that you can do with it. And it adheres to the open close principle because I use the strategy pattern. Okay. Which the open close principle is one of those principles that is really, really difficult to implement in a lot of cases. It's kind of harder to do. If you know the strategy pattern and you can eliminate all the switch case statements and select statements, switch statements and select statements, there we go. If you can eliminate all of those, you essentially eliminate all of the code that is static and is closed for change, right? You should never have a line of code that you have to continuously add new circumstances to, right? You shouldn't have to go in and change a function because of a new circumstances being introduced to that function. That's a bad situation. However, if you have a function that is dynamic that can accept all sorts of different types of, it's more generic, right? More, the further abstract you can get, the better. Okay. The problem is that interviews are high stress affairs. This is great when you've got to climb a tree to get away from a tiger. This is horrible if you're trying to demonstrate your ability to function mentally, right? If it's high stress, if you're trying to run from a tiger that's trying to kill you, being under a lot of stress is probably a good thing. It's going to heighten your senses and increase your agility. But it also tends to shut down the brain a little bit. It tends to shut down the higher processes, the higher thinking, because that mental capacity has to be directed to somewhere else. This is horrible if you're trying to demonstrate your ability to function mentally. It does not matter how reasonable your questions are. If this is what someone faces, you do not get an accurate picture of how good anyone with interview anxiety is. And a lot of people suffer from this. I once interviewed for a job within the company I already worked for with my existing boss and colleague. I was then asked a question about ASP.NET View State, which I drew a complete blank on. I just couldn't wrap my head around the question because of nerves. It was only when my boss reminded me that this was something I had actually taught him and my colleagues only 6 months ago that my nerves cleared. I relaxed, and then I could suddenly think clearly again. And this is, I think there's something else about this experience that he's talking about. His boss is asking him a question that he certainly knows the answer to. Okay, but maybe the way that the boss is asking the question, because the way that the boss frames the question and talks about view state is a little bit different than how his brain is conceptualizing view state or talks about view state. So some of these things are not quite like this question is being asked, but he's not really sure what exactly is being asked about view state. And that can sometimes get very confusing. And especially in this heightened state of alertness, you're trying to pick up on every clue and you're just like grasping for straws to try to solve a thing. And it's very hard to calm yourself down and think logically about what is it that they're really trying to get to. So yeah, it's definitely a problem. Especially this is a prime example of like this guy taught his boss about this thing, and then his boss asks him about it 6 months later, and he can't answer, right? and also the changing state of technology, right? Maybe the answer to that question 6 months ago was XYZ, but now it's something else completely different because the technology's changed. That's possible. I also get very anxious during exams and always make silly mistakes. It saddens me to see some interviewers on this thread that naively believe that the kind of stress a person feels during an exam is the same kind of stress you might experience while trying to fix some problem in front of your computer. I think the real problem is in your head. Your anxiety about job interviews is sabotaging something you're otherwise perfectly good at. You need to be more zen about this, more laid back, relaxed, confident, or something like that. Yeah, and this is something I'm always telling the junior developers that are coming out of our school. It's like you have to, my advice is almost always interview the interviewer. Try to find a way to ask them or talk to them. Get them talking about themselves. Get them talking about their company. Get them talking about their job. What are they doing? What are the kinds of things that they do? Because that is going to leave a more indelible image in their mind of who you are, right? If you're asking them to talk about themselves, people love talking about themselves, right? I like talking about me. I'm sure everybody likes talking about what's going on in their lives. So anyway, to wrap it up here, they do offer a few guidelines for ways that they could alleviate some of the problems in the interview process. Use rudimentary questions for screening. I worked for a company that was not necessarily, it was somewhat technology-based. I worked for a company that was doing the exchange by mail program for cell phones for a company that I will leave unnamed for right now. And I would interview dozens of people a week. And we had a very, very simple screening process. We literally, one of the questions that people got wrong all the time, we would set a map, just a grid map in front of them, and we would give them instructions and directions. We'd ask them to trace along with their finger to get, we follow, start on Washington Street, start on Washington and Lexington, go down, head west 2 blocks, take a left, go down another 3 blocks, head south or something like that. Or not head south, but head east now. And then go 1 block, turn right, and, what street are you on or something like that. And I'm telling you right now, the sad state of things was about 80% of the people I interviewed could not do that. Could not pass that test. Just follow these instructions on a map. That was the kind of, that's a great screening tool. That at least gets you down to some people that can at least follow instructions, right? Because that's a big one. And in that particular job, it was a really big deal. Like, you got to follow these instructions. These are the things that you have to do, because you're not an engineer who's going to fix a phone over the phone, right? You're not going to do that. We're not asking you to tear these phones apart, but we do have a set standard set of questions that we want you to ask people, and you need to follow along with their answers, and you need to be just kind of following directions. So, things like that, coming up with more rudimentary questions. Like, I think, what's if you're doing like Visual Basic, for example, what's the difference between a subroutine and a function? Okay, stuff like that. Just little simple things that kind of help to understand whether or not this person actually knows a thing or two, but isn't going to be so complex that it's just a total lottery thing. Share the interview description in advance. So if you have some sort of idea of what the interview is going to be, make sure you give it to them ahead of time. Offer alternative interview formats. I'm not really sure what they mean by this, but while some candidates may prefer conducting the technical interview on a whiteboard, others may feel more comfortable working within an integrated development environment on the computer. Yeah, I'd be just like, here's an IDE, go solve this thing. Or pick one of the really good ones that I've seen is like, pick one of the problems. So if you've got like a copy of the production code into some place, like, here's this task on our, like, here is this Jira ticket or issue ticket we need solved. Go have it. Like, here it is. Ask me questions. And even if you don't solve it within that time frame, at least you can ask me. I'm the interviewer, but you can ask me all sorts of questions about the system, because I expect that you're not going to know the system. So that's a really good one, because that's like collaborative, right? That's getting a gauge for this person's knowledge. What kind of questions are they looking for? You get an idea of the direction of thought. How are they trying to solve this problem? What are the things that they're realizing they need to know in order to solve this problem? Like, that is one of the most insightful things you can possibly do. Here's our application that we're building. Here is an issue ticket. Go solve it. Ask me any questions you might have. I'll be happy to answer them for you. Right? Like, that's what you should be doing, because that's a colleague thing, right? Like, if you're going to bring someone on as a junior developer, that's what they're going to be doing for like the first 2 or 3 months anyway. Just asking questions about the system. All right, use a real problem. Yeah, like I was just saying. Solve problems as colleagues, not as examiners. Again, I like pulling an issue ticket. I think that's a great one. And that's basically it. So this is really good. I'm probably going to go ahead and leave a link to this article. It's really good. There's a lot more in here than just what I covered. But I did want to offer up, to wrap this whole thing up, I did want to offer up, unfortunately, because these questions do get asked, you still should probably prepare. So there's LeetCode, which is, of course, the one that they were talking about in the article. A really good one that you should try is interviewing.io. These are really, really fantastic, okay? Because you get like feedback. It's not just, here's this question you failed or passed. This is, we give you actual feedback about this. And sometimes you can even do like an actual live interview. So not just a thing like that. And the last site that I'm going to also point out is HackerRank. They do a lot of this kind of same things too, like check out your language proficiency. And you also can kind of like do this ranking system to try to figure out where you are, like gauge your abilities. So definitely, these are some great sites. I really like interviewing.io and HackerRank. They're two of the best out there, I think. LeetCode, I hadn't even heard about until this article. And I know there's tons of these sites that just do this kind of thing. So anyway, tell me about your experiences during interviews. That's what I want you guys to do. So please engage with the channel. Please engage with these videos. Give me the thumbs ups. Give me the comments. Talk to me about your circumstances, because all this helps the YouTube algorithm in order to get these videos. Sometimes they get offered up a little bit more. People start coming to them and seeing them. So if you guys can be a little interactive on it, it would really, really help me out. So thank you so much for doing that. But yeah, my question in the comments is going to be like, what are some of the more difficult questions that you've had to deal with in a job interview? What are some of those things? Like, tell us about your job interview experiences, especially the technical interview section. All right, so let me just take a look and see what we've got for comments. Oh God, not view state. I can so relate to this entire live stream. My interviewing experiences, companies are too slow with interviews. They take forever to get back to you. Yeah, that's another thing. I fully admit that I am a culprit of this. I sometimes would do an interview and tell them that I'm going to get back to them, and then I forget to get back to them because they didn't pass or I picked someone else. That's I totally understand the frustration there, and I should not have done that. I totally cop to that. I should have done a better job of that, but it is what it is. So yeah, again, please in the comments, tell us a little bit about your experiences during an interview, and don't forget to hit that thumbs up button to let me know that you liked the video, and hopefully YouTube says, oh, people like this video. Maybe other people will like the video. That would be cool. All right, thanks so much for joining me today. Hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day, and tomorrow, don't forget, it's Friday. Friday. All right, have a good one.